Hi, my name's John. I'm an alcoholic. Kirk, thank you for asking me to come here and speak. Somebody asked me, do I like speaking? And I said, yes. There's two reasons. One, I just always like to be the center of attention, and I get to talk about my two favorite things, me and Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm grateful that, thanks, Charles, for leading off. That was a great share. I appreciate you doing that. I explained the tie here, my Valentine Looney Tunes tie. Today, February 13th, 31 years ago today, I asked my wife to marry me, and last October we celebrated 30 years of marriage, and now I'm going to tell you what a miracle that is. I was about 34. I was 34 when we got married, and in the previous 20 years before, there was a recurring theme that I kept hearing. I love you, but you drink too much, and so get out was usually the end of that. And little things like I'd show up 7 hours late for dinner and find my clothes in the yard, or I found somebody else, and so so that was the theme of my life was. You're a nice guy, but you're a drunk, and that was kind of the basic theme of all of that. And so I never could be able to stick around long enough to be in a relationship for more than a year or two before I got thrown out. And so the fact that Diane and I have been together for over 30 years is truly a testament to God's work in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I grew up here in Prescott. Believe it or not, there's people in this room that saw me drink, I grew up here in Prescott and went away to college. I drank my way through high school without a whole lot of consequences. I was pretty lucky about that. I am now absolutely convinced I qualified for this program when I was 13 years old. The minute I started drinking, I was a blackout drinker. Just one episode, when I was about 14 years old, I was down in Mexico with a bunch of guys, mostly older guys. The younger brother and I kind of tagged along up there with these guys down to San Carlos, and I was 13, and I snuck into the cantina with these guys, these older high school guys, and I talked them into buying me beer, and I thought I was going to be pretty cool, and I drank beer with these guys until I don't remember how long I was there, until the next thing I know I'm down on the beach. And I'm rummaging through the ice chest of a bunch of college kids from Tucson who were down there, and I'm going through their ice chest looking for more beer, and they chased me away because they didn't know who the hell I was. And one of their little brothers, who was also tagging along, they were standing over in the corner with one of his brother's bottle of rum, and I went over and tried to talk him out of that rum. And most of this I can't verify is actually true. This was reported to me later, so may or may not be true. I'm guessing it is, because this kid wouldn't give me his brother's bottle of rum, so I decked him and stole it. So at that time, I'm a 13-year-old skinny, nerdy guy with the crooked glasses, and I was just a geek when I was that age. And so I went from being the skinny geek kid with the Buddy Holly glasses to robbery in order to get booze, and in a space of a couple hours. And the good news is I found other ways to get booze without having to steal it from people. So otherwise I would be telling this story somewhere else, I suspect. But anyway, I grew up, went off to college, and found a bunch of guys that drank like me in college, and we just continued to drink. I just continued to drink my way through life, and started meeting the girls who kept saying, I love you, you drink too much, get out. And so I started hanging around with a bunch of guys in college, and we were, actually the more I think about it, the less we actually did. It was mostly just drinking and making fun of other people. That was kind of my college career, and we'd drink and criticize people who weren't as cool as we were, and yeah, that was it, my college career. And but somehow I was able to pull a graduation out of that hat somehow by getting easier and easier majors, I think. But along the way, everybody that I was hanging around with pretty much decided, what are we doing here? We're all drinking and getting in trouble. And luckily, I didn't get in trouble with the law. I just got in trouble with. I developed the idea that cars should be. You could make special cars for drunks and put them together with Velcro, because you could change the fenders and bumpers and stuff a lot easier if they were just Velcroed on. Because my car just kept running into shit a lot. And in fact, I pretty much emptied every junkyard in Yavapai County of parts for my '66 Ranchero. I had a friend of mine used to call it the mulatto auto, because one fender was brown and the hood was faded red, and then this other side was all caved in and the bumper was gone. And I drove that car until I moved back here to Prescott, but I didn't think anybody would suspect that I drank just because I'm driving this thing with all the dents and missing parts on it, because I had everybody fooled, I will have you know. But anyway, I ended up spending years drinking my way through college and ended up back here in Prescott, and I was gonna be a big shot in my mind. I was gonna be one of those guys who drank hard and partied hard and worked hard and kicked ass and took names, and that was going to be me, And I had somehow got my way through law school, ended up being a lawyer here in town, and I thought I was going to be a big shot. And I got the partying hard and the drinking hard part down. The working hard, not so much. One reason I'm lazy and I'm selfish, and that's just kind of the bottom line. But the other part is I found out this was a kind of a business strategy that did not necessarily work. The day I opened my office, I was so hungover I could barely get there. And so I would go to work and drink, and things just plugged along until I had been back in town for about 6 months, and it was a Sunday afternoon. It was one of those Sundays where I was actually going to do something that weekend. I had some plans. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, and then it was happy hour on Friday, and then it was Sunday afternoon, and I didn't have anything but a hangover, and I was half drunk and half hungover, and it's like I just pissed away another whole weekend, and I'm going to have to get up and go to work tomorrow hungover and sick one more time, and I couldn't stand it. So I called a friend of mine who I knew had been to treatment in Phoenix for his addiction issues, and I called him and said, I can't quit drinking. And he said, okay, well, I'll come up and see you. And he came up and gave me a big book and took me to a meeting, an AA meeting, and actually didn't take me to a meeting. He told me where a meeting was. And this is why I admire anybody who can walk into AA, to come into this program. There was the original old Alano Club was down on Granite Street in the same building where the Wild Iris Cafe is now, and there's an Alano Club in there, which I didn't know what an Alano Club was, but it was a place where they had AA meetings, and I didn't know that till my friend told me. So I was going to go to that meeting. So I walked by up to the end of the corner and walked back to the end of the corner, and I walked back and forth in front of that thing for about 25 minutes before I got the nerve to walk in the door. I could not make myself walk in. I was just so scared and nervous, and what was going to happen. And then I finally walked in, and it was a young people's candlelight meeting, and I was so freaked out I almost ran out of the room. But I stayed and didn't drink for about a month. And apparently I thought that I had somehow overreacted, I guess, because at the end of that month I started drinking again. And I don't remember how I transitioned at all from going to these meetings, twice a week even, going to these meetings to drinking again. And I can't remember at all how that happened. What happened that I would start drinking again. All I know is I drank for another year and a half. And in that year and a half, I can honestly tell you I quit drinking 300 times. I would get up in the morning, and I would be sweating booze out of every pore that I had. And I would get up, and I would force myself to go to work when I really just wanted to lay on the cold tile in my bathroom. So I'd get up, and I'd go to work, and I'd sweat it out because I was running my own business. I was almost getting fired, and I was self-employed. and I would go to work because I was about 3 days from bankruptcy all the time. And you'll understand why the more you listen to the story. But I would get up and I would go and I would just be dying, and I'd be sweating booze and dying. And on the way to work, I would swear that I was never going to drink again. Or at least I'm not going to drink today, or I'm not going to drink this week, or whatever the lie du jour was. I would promise myself, today I'm not going to get drunk, and tomorrow I'll feel better and I can actually get some work done. But I'd just sit in my office all hungover, and I would read that big book my friend gave me. And I would read the book, and I'd go, I'm drunk, and I'm hungover, and I feel like shit, and I'm reading this big book. It's just as cheery as you would think, that kind of life. It was just as much fun as you would guess that was. And I would read that book and I'd go, okay, today I'm not drinking. And today I'm not drinking. And then I would get off work, 3, 4 o'clock, and I would be heading towards my car. And I had to walk past this bar on the way back to where my car was parked. And they had some kind of mysterious vacuum on the front of that bar. And I would walk by and it would suck me right in the door. And I would either order a Coke or just one beer, just for something to do. I'm just going to have one beer, and then I'll go home, and then tomorrow I'll feel better. And then next thing I know, it's closing time, and I'm driving home drunk one more time. And I did that over. And then the next morning, Groundhog Day, I'm drunk, I'm hungover, I'm sweating booze. Today I'm not going to get drunk. Today I'm not going to get drunk. 5 o'clock, I'd forget that I wasn't going to get drunk, and I'd be drinking again. And, when the big book says the suffering of the day or a month before, or a week or a month before, is not sufficient to keep us sober. Hell, I could not keep the suffering and humiliation of yesterday fresh enough in my mind to keep me from getting drunk that day. It was just over and over and over. And like I said, I am not kidding when I said I quit drinking 300 times in that year and a half, and it rarely lasted all day long. And so every day I would be hungover and sick and drunk, and I just, it was just like, it was as sad and pathetic as it sounds. And I was talking to a guy this afternoon, one of my sponsees this afternoon, and I said, when I started drinking, it talked about that feeling, we'd be restless, irritable, discontent unless we can get that sense of ease and comfort that comes from taking a few drinks. That explains my life. I was restless, irritable, discontented. My life sucked. You fucked up my life. They're not doing it right. Everything's wrong. I just need a couple drinks to take the edge off, and I'd get that sense of ease and comfort. But towards the end, that sense of ease and comfort lasted about 10 minutes. I'd go in the bar, and I'd have a drink, and it would last about 10 minutes, and then I would spend the rest of the night chasing it, trying to get it back. And that's just the way it was, and there was just nothing I could do about it. I had this woman who was working for me. We got into a relationship, as they say. I thought, oh, good, this is going to work out okay. Now I look back, she was pretty wildly Al-Anon, and so she was kind of taking care of me, and I was, thought this is a great arrangement. And so we had this relationship going, and until she said, I love you, but you drink too much. It's like, where did I hear that before? And she said, I love you, but you drink too much. I'm quitting. I'm not working for you anymore. P.S. You owe me a lot of money because you're way behind on my paycheck, and I'm going home to my husband. So the hell with you. And so, what the hell is that all about? And so I was going to prove to her that I was not an alcoholic. After I had one really horrible, actually it was a Valentine's Day weekend. I had this horrible drunken thing where I fell asleep in my car somewhere. It was just horrible. But then I was going to quit drinking to show her I wasn't an alcoholic. And so I quit drinking. I mustered everything I had, and I didn't drink. And people said, I liked you better when you were drinking because I was angry. I was tense. I was irritable. I was miserable, and I made everybody miserable around me because I was like a clenched fist all day long. because I had no booze for the sense of ease and comfort, and I had no program because I didn't come back to AA. I'd still read that book. Now I realize that reading the book did not help me because I never did anything it said to do. You know, so follow these directions. No, I would read the directions, but I would never do anything it said to do. I heard a speaker one time say, it's like reading a cookbook and wondering why you're still hungry, you know. Because I just never did what it said to do. And I didn't want to go to a meeting, because I'd been to those other meetings. I know if you go to the meetings, you've got to raise your hand as a newcomer, and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to get sober and then go to a meeting to show them that I could get sober by myself, because there's no ego ever involved in anything I do. So I was going to get sober by myself to prove to this woman I wasn't an alcoholic, and then maybe in 6 months or so I'd start going to AA after I'd kind of got this thing mastered. Do you smell a recipe for success in there somewhere? So again, I was angry. I was irritable. Everything annoyed me. I was still hanging around the bars, drinking grapefruit juice. Fun. And that just went on. She was not impressed. Believe me, this did not impress this woman at all. This did not. She did not come back into my life, which is probably good for both of us. And so that went on for about almost 4 months, where I almost didn't drink for 4 months, with a couple exceptions. But anyway, I was on this horrible, painful dry drunk for about 4 months, and I couldn't pull that off any longer, and I found myself drunk against my will, and to my surprise, on a couple of occasions. It was a weekend, some people came into town, I ended up drinking, and I was completely surprised, and ended up drunk, and said, well, I'm going to fix that. And the next weekend, I was drunk, and I was driving around Prescott in the late afternoon on a Saturday afternoon in my car, drinking beer, and I couldn't get drunk, and I couldn't quit drinking, and I couldn't do it. It wasn't working. I wasn't getting drunk. I couldn't quit. I'm just driving in my car drinking, and it's just not working. And like, that just really sucks. And during this period of this dry drunk, a person somehow gleaned that I was in trouble. I'm sure it was barely obvious at all to anybody watching. And this guy is gone from us now, Larry Katz, who was this loud East Coast lawyer with absolutely no sense of personal space, kept hounding me. John, we got a chair for you. Come on down. We got to come to the meeting. We got a chair for you. There's an easier way to do this. I don't know why he didn't think it was easy for me. He goes, come on down. You can come in. And I don't even know how he knew I was trying to quit drinking. And so he kept hounding me, and of course I gave the absolute normal alcoholic response. I'm just fine, God damn it. And so, but he kept bugging me, and then that one day I'm driving into my car drinking, and I can't get sober, and I can't quit drinking, and I was so desperate I called him and left a message on his answering machine. Answering machines are like voicemail. It's like, horse-drawn voicemail. Anyway, so I called this guy and left a message and said, I'm not as smart as I think I am. I need help. And that was a Saturday afternoon. And I don't even think I drank anything after that. I think I was so much in shock that I actually asked for help that I didn't drink. And Monday morning, he checked his answering machine and came, scooped me off, and took me to a meeting. And within 2 days of that, I was at the Prescott group, which has been my home group mostly since that time. And, I started going to there, and I started doing service work, and they made me the secretary of the meeting, which sounded a lot more glamorous than it really was. It was like show up 2 hours early, make 100 cups of coffee, set up a whole bunch of chairs, and then when it's over, do it in reverse. But that was exactly what I needed. I did that for 6 months. Every Wednesday night I was there from 6 o'clock till about 10 o'clock at night, setting that meeting up and tearing it down. And I got to know everybody in that meeting. And there's a lot of old-timers in that meeting. A lot of really old people in that meeting. Like my friend John over here just had 28 years, one of those old guys. And I got to do that, and that was really important. But here was the problem. I still didn't like doing the step kind of stuff. It really looked good in theory, but so I'd ask I was a stealth sponsee. I'd ask somebody to be my sponsor, and then I'd never talk to him again. And I don't know if anybody's ever done that before, but I'd ask a guy to be my sponsor, and then I would avoid him at all costs. See him at meetings, I'd go hide, because I didn't want him to have to actually do anything, you know. So I stayed sober on meetings. I went to probably 300 meetings that year, and my first year, and I did service work, but I didn't get a sponsor, and I didn't do the steps. And 2 weeks after I picked up a chip that said, you know, and I said, what a great job I'm doing, and they gave me a cake and a card and chip, and I extolled about how swell things were, and 2 weeks later I was drunk. And I found myself again mysteriously drunk against my will, and fortunately, a guy came by and saved my life. The next day, I had worked my way, eased my way back into drinking. I had a drink about 10 o'clock in the morning. 3 hours later, I was in a blackout, don't remember anything the next day. Guy comes by my house, saves my life, and that guy came to my house, easily figured out I'd been drinking, and that man stayed with me all day long, and just hung around with me all day long. I didn't ask him to. He just did, and he hung around with me all day long, took me to a meeting that night, Sunday night, and I raised my hand as a newcomer, and that saved my life. Because with my ego and my pride, I don't know if I'd have been able to get myself back to a meeting if that guy hadn't done that. So he's just one of a long list of people who saved my life over the years. And he got me back to that meeting, and I raised my hand as a newcomer, and I got a whole new set of 30, 60, 90, and 60, 96 months, 9-month chips. Did the whole set all over again, and haven't had to have a drink since. I have not had to repeat that. So the last drink I had that day that guy came and saved my life was August 3rd, 1985. And by the grace of this program, I haven't had to have a drink since. So that's my sobriety date. The Prescott group is my home group. My sponsor is Larry W. I have a sponsor. He knows that he's my sponsor. I see him at least once a week at my house. We have a book study at my house. He comes there. He's been doing that every week. And the funny story about Larry is before Larry was my sponsor, Dave Smith was my sponsor for 15 years before he died against my will. And Dave had saved my life periodically for 15 years, and he taught me about the steps in the book and dedication. He was 40 years sober and 72 years old when he died of cancer, and he sponsored God only knows how many people over that 40 years of his sobriety. There's people he had been sponsoring for over 25 years. And he was as dedicated to the steps in the program the week before he died as he was at any time. And that was the guy that showed me dedication to the program. And Dave and I and some other guys, and my wife and Dave's wife had started big book studies in this town, which I think is probably the genesis of almost every big book study they have in this town. We started that about 20 years ago, and I did that with Dave up until he died. And the funny story about that is when Dave died, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I quit doing the big book studies and, said, I'm tired, I can't do that anymore. And then I finally got around to asking Larry to be my sponsor. And what Larry said was, oh, good, I'd like to be your sponsor. And I know you used to do those big book studies with Dave, so I'd like you to, let's start a big book study. So what do? You ask a guy to be a sponsor, he says to do something, you go, no. It's like, okay. And so that was 7 years ago, and every Monday night for the last 7 years we've been meeting at my house doing a book study. And it saved my life, again, my life gets saved by doing shit I don't want to do. And that's the good news and the bad news of this program. The good news is it'll save your life. It'll give you a life that's more wonderful than I ever could imagine. I have, like I said, a wife who, we've been happily married for 30 years. I have a stepson who's been in my life. We got married. He was 13 years old. Bonus. Got a teenager in the deal, and you know, he's never seen me drunk. My wife's never seen me drunk. I have 2 grandchildren who run my life, and they've never seen me drunk. These 2 grandkids, these 2 girls, they just think Grandpa's the biggest soft touch in the world, and well, he kind of is, but you know, but I got this whole big giant family, and they've never seen me drunk, you know, and what a gift is that, you know. I am in the process of retiring from I'm working myself trying to get retired from a career that I can't imagine how I didn't lose when I was 32 years old. I mean, I was, I don't think the smart money would have bet on me living to be 35, but it was, there's no way I could have kept that career for another year and a half, and now I'm retiring from that career, and you know, my brain says, I worked in the same place for 20 years, and I thought I was going to get fired every day because my ego and my fear and my craziness, oh my God, any day they're going to come in and fire me. I retired and they gave me a Lifetime Achievement Award. It's like, what? Don't you know? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know where I came from? You know, but those are the gifts of this program, you know. I get to sponsor a bunch of really great guys, you know, and that's, you know, I have got this great life. And I was reading this. And this is the other thing I was reading with my guy sponsoring this evening. There's a place in the book, and this is one of my wife's favorite parts of the book, where it says, you know, in God's hands, our deepest, darkest secret can be our greatest gift. With it, you can avoid death and misery for others. Well, I'm kind of a busy guy, so averting death and misery for others, I mean, you know, what kind of a selfish prick would I have to be to say, no, I can't help somebody because I'm too busy watching reruns on TV? But that's the gift of this program. I've got a ton of friends in this town. I've been sober in this town my whole sobriety for 33 years. You know, there's people in this town that I've known that whole time. And I got a host of friends, and I just got miracles just keep coming up all the time. You know, I've got some new friends and the people that I've known for a long time that I get to work with, some new guys coming to town. And, you know, my wife sponsors about, I don't know, 86 people. And you know, she's the one they like to hear speak, so sometimes they have to make her come here. She hates speaking. She's really good at it, but she hates getting up here and doing this speaking. Like, again, I like it because I get to be the center of attention. But anyway, I got this program is great. And the only problem is, like I said, there's good news, there's bad news. The good news, it'll save your life and give you you know, the best life you'll ever have. The bad news is, this is it. This is it. It's folding chairs in hot rooms. It's talking to people and taking them through the big book when you'd rather be watching reruns on TV, you know. It's, but this is the deal. You know, the big book says, there's a solution. You won't like it. It says, nobody likes the leveling of our pride, our confession of shortcomings that's necessary for its consummation. I mean, those steps save your life. Nobody wants to do them. Because I'm lazy and selfish. That's what I don't want to do. But I will tell you, when I do these things and I keep getting reminded that this is the stuff I got to do, you know, it doesn't get any better than that. I'm a lucky man, and I'm blessed to be here, and I want to thank Kirk for asking me to share. Thank you.
Thank you, John. This has been a regular meeting of the Rarely Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are cordially invited to join us again next week. Please bring a friend. There are approximately 100 meetings of AA each week in the Prescott area. We advise that you attend as many as possible, and we hope you will join us again soon. After the prayer, will the people who volunteered to do that stuff, and your court cards are on the back table. Let's circle up and say the Lord's Prayer. Thank you all for coming.